Hello, this is Melvin Black, and I'm going to talk about creating a PowerPivot Datasource. PowerPivot is the brains behind Excel and Powerview dashboards. In this discussion, I'm going to explain how to build a PowerPivot Datasource for future dashboards and reports. We began in Excel. What we need to first do to create a PowerPivot Datasource is we need to first go and select the PowerPivot menu option and then select Manage. Now I'm going to build a Powerview data source based off SQL Server, and I'm going to use a SQL Server database that I've already created that has restaurant data. Now once the PowerPivot environment opens, I'm going to select Database, and I'm going to again select SQL Server because that is where my data resides. Now I'm going to give my server connection a name, and I'm going to call it Tom's Diner, and I'm going to give it the local host because that's where my SQL Server resides, and I'm going to give it the name, and I'm going to give it the name of the database. Verify that connection is successful, and I'm going to select Next. In my example, I know which tables I want to select, so I'm going to continue by selecting Next. All of these tables are going to be used. I have dimension tables and I have a fact table, so I'm going to select the top level source table options to select all my tables, and I'm going to select Finish to bring it in. As you can see, my data is being imported, and this is a small database, so it should be relatively quick. Now, as you see towards the bottom of the PowerPivot environment, all the tables have been brought in. And now I need to establish a relationship between the tables. And the best way to do that, in my opinion, is by doing it from the diagram view. So I select diagram view from the menu option here. And what this will show me is all my tables in more of a graphical format. So I'm going to create essentially a star schema. So I'm going to bring my fact table in the center just so it can mimic sort of a star layout. Where I have my fact in the middle and it's surrounded by its dimension tables. I'm going to size it here for better visibility, and I'm going to make my relationships with my fact table with the associated dimension tables by linking my surrogate keys located in my fact table with the primary key in the dimension table. So I'm going to start with my date dimension, so I'll create relationship by right clicking my surrogate key, and in my fact table I'm going to select that I'm connecting to the date dimension. It brings it over because my connection with my fact table has the same relationship, has the same name as my dimension table, and that column is date SK, short for date surrogate key. And I'm going to select create, and I'm going to do this for all my other dimensions. I've done my time. I'm going to do my location. Do my dining dimension. My menu, and finally my category. Now you can see my fact table has a relationship with all 6 dimensions. And what I'm also doing is I'm going to create a hierarchy in my menu dimension by simply selecting create hierarchy. And I'm going to give this hierarchy a name menu list, or let's just say menu. And I'm going to drag my category, because it's my top level, my subcategory, which is after that, and I'm going to add the item description, which is even a more granular description of the menu item. Alrighty, and I think that will sort of conclude my relationship building between my fact table and my dimension table. Now I'm going to return back to the data view by selecting data view in the menu option, and this time I'm going to select my fact diner hourly sales because I want to create a calculation. I'm going to select net sales, and I'm going to create a calculation for net sales by highlighting that column, selecting auto sum, and I'm going to use the aggregation sum. And as you see at the bottom, it created a calculation here, and you can see my associated formula for that calculation. I'm going to rename this to something more friendly and just call it sales. And I'm going to change the format to currency because it makes it easier to read. And I'm also going to add another calculation for my order numbers, and I'm going to just count the number of number orders, which would indicate the total number of orders. And if I highlight that calculation, I'll see the formula here, and I'm going to give it a friendlier name and just call it orders. And I want it to be a little easier to read, so I'm going to add some columns, and I know I do not want trailing zeros, so I'm going to remove those. Now I also want to change the names to something a little bit more friendly. So instead of fact diner hourly sales, I'll just rename that to diner sales, and also do this for my category. Let's rename that, instead of dim category, let's just call it category. And under dinner sales, I have some columns I don't necessarily need to have the users that are creating reports to see, like my surrogate keys, location key, dine-in key. I'll just highlight those columns actually, let me do it this way, and I'll right click and select hide from client tools, because those columns are simply not useful inside the report building environment. Now if I want to return back to Excel to look at the data source that I just created, I just select the Excel icon, switch back to that environment, and now to use that PowerPivot Datasource, I simply select data, existing connections, Tom Diner, and I'm just going to select the pivot table and select OK. And now you can see I have my data source for my use, and as you can see, I've also removed some of the information that I originally had in my fact table, and I'm going to select sales and orders, those two new calculations I created, and let me expand it here so they can have a little better visibility. And let's go to that category dimension that I've configured previously. And we can see that I have an item shown up here. But I think a better example to show, to take a look at my hierarchy that I created. Let's select the menu hierarchy I selected. And now you can see that it had a top level, a subcategory, and a menu item description. And what you saw is a demonstration of building a PowerPivot data source and then using that data source in some visualizations tool like Excel to visualize that data. And that concludes this presentation.